An Enneagram Secret, Part 1, Who's Who of the Enneagram. And I thought, and I mentioned this before we started, I thought we should start with a passage of Scripture on this issue. Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 15:33, do not be deceived. He does that a lot, by the way. Do not be
he
deceived.
does.
Bad company ruins good morals. So you have to be careful who you hang out with. My mother tried to caution me of that when I was back in the days of my misspent youth, and I didn't always listen well. Joy's mother warned her also. This seems to be a theme down through history. Watch out who you hang out with. They will be a bad influence on you. Potentially. They could be a good influence if they're a good person.
Well, this is not just a case of hanging out with either. This is a case of promoting.
This is a case of promoting, learning from, and then adding to, embellishing, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. I want to start off with a little brief video vignette. How do you like that word? I know big words sometimes. It's sort of surprising to some people, I guess. This is Bill Gualtieri, and we'll let you explain who that is in a moment. But we want to hear from him because this is going to be how we're going to start with this question of a bad company, let's say.
Okay.
Interactions until you're able to learn something that's new and cool. But it's complex because people are complex. Spirituality is complex. So we need a tool that is complex. We need a tool that intimidates the psychologist because that's how deep our soul is. That's how intricate our personalities and relationships and spirituality is. So I will never get to the bottom of the Enneagram. If I read every book on it, there's just so much wisdom and knowledge in it. It's been over so many generations and even centuries. It's been spoken into with tremendous insight and wisdom. If you don't believe me, just check out some of the books on the table there by people like Richard Rohr and Riso and Hudson. I mean, there's a lot of modern psychotherapy from the last few generations that are in the Enneagram. And so that's what I love about it, is the way it's bringing together psychology and spirituality, the soul. That's what I'm all about. Soul shepherding. The Enneagram is a tool for soul shepherding. And once you know your type, you've got a map that you can follow for how you're going to grow in Christ-likeness. Now,
okay. What say you, Guru?
Well, yes, that was quite a little clip there. And I can tell you, the first time I heard it, I listened to this and then did a post on it. And since then, I've done like 3 different posts about it. I just did one recently, just so people know, called 4 Statements You Cannot Take to the Bank. And it's 4 statements that Bill Gualtieri makes here. Bill Gualtieri is, he has a ministry or counseling business, I'm not sure what to call it, called Soul Shepherding. And he got onto the Enneagram, and apparently influenced by Richard Rohr and Russ Hudson and Don Riso's book, as we heard him mention them and recommend them. And now what I want to address here is his statement about complexity. He seems very impressed by the complexity of the Enneagram. And that immediately made me think of astrology, which is even more complex than the Enneagram. It's probably 5 times more complex. It has much more stuff to it. And I'm talking about an astrological chart. So it's very complex. And in fact, a lot of things in the occult and in the New Age are complex. You start off on a surface thing, a surface level, and then you're gradually, if you're really serious and you get drawn into it, it gets more and more and more complex. It has all these nuances and subtleties and different directions you can go in. So him being impressed by complexity as though that makes it valid is a complete mistake. Complexity does not indicate validity. And the New Age, let me point out, is very good at making things complex. And when the Enneagram entered the New Age, that's where all those other things got added to it, like the wings. And then there's the narrative path. And there's the diamond approach to the Enneagram. And there's more. Like there's all these approaches to the Enneagram that all comes out of the New Age, very complex. There is a phrase in Revelation, I think chapter 2, the deep things of Satan. And really, I think that the complexity is to draw you in. He also said that centuries of wisdom and knowledge were poured into the Enneagram. This is completely false because the Enneagram of personality has only been around since about 1971. And even then, not very many people knew about it. So that wasn't all that long ago. And the Enneagram.
Right. And we address all of this.
20.
We address all of this in the book.
Yes.
At length. So we want to point this out, and then we want to move along quickly because you and I are terrible at keeping our schedule.
Yes, we are. Especially you, Don.
Oh, please.
I know he's not going to say anything.
Mm-hmm. I'll be a gentleman.
I know you will. I had to get that in there.
Okay. So Bill Gualtieri, Soul Shepherding, promotes psychotherapy, which, of course, as you know, I am not a fan of, Jungianism, that sort of thing. And so that concerns me. He points to 3 authors, two of which we'll talk about today. Another one who's in the title of our book, even, Richard Rohr, we will spend more time on next week when we do part 2 of this. But all of this is covered in the book. Each of the individuals we're going to talk about is covered in the book. So Bill Gualtieri, now where was he at, by the way, just so the viewers know, this is not just out there in some neighborhood home.
Right.
This was sponsored by who?
This was at Saddleback.
Saddleback, okay.
Right.
So Saddleback has invited occultism into the church through Bill Gualtieri, unwittingly, perhaps, let's say, maybe they just didn't know, because they didn't seem to do the research or even be aware they should be doing research on it. Okay. So let's go to the beginning. George Ivanovich Gurdjieff. Who is that?
Yes, George Gurdjieff is the esoteric teacher. I'll be very quick on him because we've talked about him a few times. He was raised Eastern Orthodox, but he left that to pursue his own spiritual, interests, which involved a lot of esoteric ideas and ideas from different religions. We don't know exactly what he did. There are stories about it. There's a book about it called Meetings with Remarkable Men, but I don't think it's been verified as being actually historic. So there's a lot of tales, but apparently he did do some searching, and he did have a very Gnostic, esoteric worldview that caused him to come up with this 9-sided, 9-pointed figure, the Enneagram. And he used it to illustrate, in his mind, the cosmic laws of the universe. So supposedly anything could fit into the Enneagram, any law, any principle, mainly on the spiritual realm, but also mathematical. He played around with it mathematically. He said it illustrated the laws of 3 and 7. He put a musical scale on it, and he just did lots of things with it. And it came to be used as an illustration or as a tool for showing going from being the sleeping self to the awakened self. I think that was written about by his pupil, P.D. Ouspensky, who was
Who's next on our list, P.D. Ouspensky. Who is P.D. Ouspensky, and why does he matter to us?
Yes, Peter Ouspensky was a Russian. He was a very serious guy. He, was looking into spiritual things, and he became a student of Gurdjieff and really, learned at the feet of Gurdjieff. And he had the kind of mind that would grasp all this and remember it. He wrote 4 books that illustrated or supposedly conveyed all the teachings of Gurdjieff. And so it's his books mainly that give the information of Gurdjieff's ideas on the Enneagram. And the path or following Gurdjieff's teachings through Ouspensky was called the Fourth Way. And there still actually are groups around the world that follow the teachings of Gurdjieff. They're really some of them are kind of cults. But they still exist, and they're still followers of these ideas that were written about by Ouspensky. So Gurdjieff and Ouspensky are very important to laying the foundation for all this.
Okay. Third on the list, Oscar Ichazo.
Oscar Ichazo is the next guy on the scene. Somehow got hold of the teachings of Gurdjieff from what Ouspensky had written. There are a lot of stories on how he got it. We don't really know. It seems likely that he ran across some followers of Gurdjieff. Oscar Ichazo was Bolivian, but he started a school in Chile, in Arica, Chile, in the northern part of the country on the coast. And this was an occult school. He taught occult concepts. This would be like going to some kind of esoteric New Age type place today, like I went to. I went to a place in Atlanta called the Foundation for Truth, and they had mediums, astrologers, psychics, all those people there. And you could take classes on tarot cards. You could take classes on past life regression. You could take classes on in fact, I started studying astrology there. So he was running a school somewhat like that, except it was very secretive. And you had to kind of take him on as your teacher. Okay. So he had the Enneagram, but he did not teach it for personality. He taught it as showing you your ego fixations. These ego fixations were your false self, your false idea of who you are. And you have to kind of tear those away to get down to the essence of who you are. There's a pure, unsullied essence that is who you are. And that was the point of using the Enneagram.
And some of his disciples tell a story that he got his information from some spirit beings.
Yes, he wasn't. Yes, he did have contact with 2 or claimed to get messages from 2 spirit beings. He also said his group was guided by an interior master. Okay, so this would be a spirit being. Now, I don't know if he was referring to Metatron or the Green Kutub, which are the names of 2 of the spirits. But right. Yes, he definitely did spirit contact. That's for sure.
Okay, so far we don't have a single Christian influence on this from its inception with Gurdjieff. Okay.
No.
Next in line, Claudio Naranjo.
Yes, now he's probably the biggest name in the Enneagram of the way it's used today, because he's the one who came up with the Enneagram of personality. And he was a student of Ichazo at Arica. And he eventually left, and he went to Esalen, a very edgy New Age type think tank in Big Sur, California. And he developed the Enneagram and started teaching it. Now, he claims, there are 2 videos on YouTube where he claims he got most of the information for the types from automatic writing. And in one video, he says it's partly his observations, but mostly automatic writing. In the other video, he just says it's from automatic writing. Automatic writing. Yeah, I need to say what that is. I should say what that is.
You will, but I want to point out that is the last video we actually played. That it's about a 4-minute clip.
That's true. In the last video, right. So you can see that in our previous video. And automatic writing is when you allow yourself to be, you're channeling a message from some source, from a disembodied source, and you're channeling in such a way that you're writing it. You're not speaking it or just hearing it. You're writing it down, so you kind of give into it. And this is a known occult practice. I knew about it when I was in the New Age. In fact, I tried it several times. It never worked for me, which is probably a good thing. But there are people who have written books from automatic writing. So it's very much like channeling. And this is what Claudio Naranjo claims. And he also affirms the use of spirit contact. He doesn't call it that. He calls it getting information from higher sources or a higher authority. And he really truly believed that you could get,
Right.
Knowledge.
Right. One fairly famous work like that is A Course in Miracles by Helen Schuckman.
Yes, that's
done automatic writing.
Yeah, that was a channeled book. Yeah, I guess, I don't know if she do it by writing. I'm not sure. I know she channeled it.
Did.
Heard.
Yeah,
she heard.
Did.
I don't know. Okay.
Okay. We're not going to get sidetracked because the next one.
We got to stop that.
The next one is we're going to do a little film clip here again to introduce the next character in do the audio. Here we go.
But don't get lost in the external traits. They're just partial giveaways. And when you get good at it, you read energies. I mean, really. And this is the reason that Helen Palmer got into it. She told me herself. I mean, she was a psychic intuitive. And she's convinced that you can train people to be psychic. Well, that's what this was about initially. We didn't use that kind of word in the early centuries.
So the Enneagram and all of this training was about psychic energies. That's what this is about.
Reading energies. He says reading energies, which is very much a psychic phrase. A psychic would say that because they're reading energies, these things that you have to be psychic to see and understand. And he's saying the Enneagram was this tool that Helen Palmer used to read energies. And Helen Palmer is the one who introduced it first, as far as I know, first introduced it into the New Age. She got it from Naranjo, I believe, and she started teaching it and writing books on it. She is still alive and still talking about the Enneagram. You can find her on YouTube. If you want to know what New Age sounds like, just do a search for Helen Palmer and watch one of her many videos on YouTube for a few minutes, and you will get a good idea of what the New Age sounds like.
Well, and Richard Rohr, who we just watched, also says of her that she's a good person to go to for Christian guidance.
Oh, that's right. That's right. He did say that. And he gave her a little endorsement in that video, but he also has a written out endorsement. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
Yeah, you can go to her for Christian guidance. That just, there's almost no words for that. Just, of course, from coming from Richard Rohr.
There is heresy, heretic. Those are two words that come immediately.
Well, on Rohr's part, not on her part, because she's not a Christian. She's not a Christian.
On Rohr's part, right.
It's on Rohr's part. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Next in line, because we're going to run out of time here. Russ Hudson. Why is he important?
Russ Hudson is also a New Ager. He and the late Don Riso founded the Enneagram Institute. Russ Hudson is one of the early New Agers who took on the Enneagram and started teaching it. And he and Don Riso wrote a book called The Wisdom of the Enneagram, which is highly popular, even been recommended by Christians. Many times I've seen online Christians recommend this book. It's a total New Age book. I have a post on it. And Russ Hudson ended up being a teacher for several Christians like Chris Horitz, who wrote The Sacred Enneagram, published by Zondervan. That was the second book on the Enneagram from a perceived evangelical publisher. And Russ Hudson also is one of the teachers for Beth McCord, the Enneagram coach, as she calls herself. So Russ Hudson, especially because of his leadership in the Enneagram Institute, has influenced a lot of people, because the Enneagram Institute is seen as some kind of valid scholarly place where you can go get information on the Enneagram, and it makes it seem like it's an actual scientific valid practice.
Right.
And Russ Hudson, he's behind all that.
Okay, last one for today. Don Riso, who you mentioned, why is he important? Where does he come into play?
Right. Don Riso, probably not quite as huge a figure as Russ Hudson, but he did help Russ Hudson they both started the Enneagram Institute. Don Riso had been a Jesuit, but apparently somewhere along the way became a New Ager. There's actually another Enneagram teacher where that's the same story, and he actually changed his name. But Don Riso, of course, co-wrote this book, The Wisdom of the Enneagram, and he is mentioned sometimes when Enneagram teachers are mentioned. He did die a few years ago. I can't remember exactly the year now, but it was a few years ago.
Okay, so that will be it for this week. We're going to come back next week about the same time and do part 2 of the Who's Who in the Enneagram. So Inside the Enneagram Secret, you can get our book you can get it on Amazon. It won't be mailed out, the paperback, until May 13. The ebook is available there on Kindle. Or you can just go to this website, enneagramsecret.com. That'll give you everything you need to know, several sources to order from, including one where you can order today and have it sometime next week even. So enneagramsecret.com. Or you can visit Marcia or I on our websites. But in the meantime, Marcia
or me.
Pardon?
Marcia or me.
Marcia or me.
You wouldn't say, come visit I.
Okay, I might. And in fact, I probably did. And with that, say goodbye, Marcia.
Oh, goodbye, and we'll see you next time.